Good afternoon. On behalf of the Center for the Study of Race and our co-sponsor, the Black Law Students Association, welcome to the University of Virginia's annual Martin Luther King event. My name is Kimberly Robinson. I direct the Center for the Study of Race. I'm also the founder and director of the Education Rights Institute. I also am the White Burkett Miller Professor of Law and Public Affairs, as well as the Martha Lubin Karsh and Bruce A. Karsh Professor of Law. I'm excited to welcome you to our annual celebration and the presentation of the Swanson Award. I will begin first with just saying a couple of words about Dr. Martin Luther King, although who can really capture such an amazing man in just a few words. But we are honoring a man who blazed an enduring trail as one of the most influential leaders of the civil rights movement. He shined a light so bright on the dire plight of African Americans and others throughout our nation, and particularly in the South, that our nation was forced to see and confront the evils of racism, violence, and abuse that African Americans and others were enduring each day. He helped to not only catalyze a national movement for civil rights for all people, but he also ushered in law and policy reforms, ranging from the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to the Voting Rights Act and others. As we begin, I thought it fitting to hear a few words from King himself in acceptance of the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964.
Today, with an abiding faith in America and an audacious faith in the future of mankind, I refuse to accept despair as the final response to the ambiguities of history. I refuse to accept the idea that the isness of man's present nature makes him morally incapable of reaching up for the eternal oughtness that forever confronts him. I refuse to accept the idea that man is mere flotsam and jetsam in the river of life, unable to influence the unfolding events which surround him. I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality.
In those same remarks, Dr. Martin Luther King stated, "I believed that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. This is why right, temporarily defeated, is stronger than evil triumphant." As we celebrate the Martin Luther King holiday today, through our scholarship, teaching, learning, service, and our daily lives, let us all, like King, refuse to accept less from our nation than liberty and justice for all. And may we be relentless in the pursuit of truth and unconditional love. It is my great honor to introduce Dean Leslie Kendrick, who will award the Gregory Swanson Award. Leslie Kendrick is the 13th Dean and the Arnold H. Professor of Law at the University of Virginia School of Law. She is an expert on torts and freedom of speech, whose work has appeared in the Harvard Law Review, Yale Law Journal, and Philosophy and Public Affairs, among other journals. Dean Kendrick is co-author of the casebook, Tort Law, Responsibilities and Redress. A member of the American Law Institute, Dean Kendrick earned her BA from the UNC Chapel Hill as a Moorhead Scholar, her master's and doctorate from Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar, and her JD from here, University of Virginia School of Law, as a Dillard Scholar. She clerked for Judge J. Harvey Wilkinson, the third of the Fourth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, and Justice David Hackett Souter of the United States Supreme Court. Let's welcome Dean Kendrick.
Thank you so much, Kimberly, for that kind introduction. I'm so glad to see all of you here. Welcome to the law school's Martin Luther King Jr. commemoration. I want to thank Kimberly Robinson, Director of the Center for the Study of Race and Law, for spearheading this event and this celebration. I also want to thank Virginia Supreme Court Chief Justice Bernard Goodwin, UVA Law Class of 1986, who will be speaking to us today. Chief Justice Goodwin is a remarkable jurist who's devoted his life to public service. Chief, I'm looking forward to your remarks. Thank you for being here. I'm also so glad that Justice Goodwin's wife, Sharon Goodwin, is with us today as well. Ms. Goodwin is a member of the Law School Class of 1988 and currently chairs the Executive Committee of the Law School Foundation's Board of Trustees. Sharon, welcome to you. My thanks and welcome to you both. My happy role today in this celebration is to present the law school's Gregory Swanson Award to two incredible students. We've always given this award at our community's Martin Luther King Jr. Day celebration because Gregory Swanson is both an important part of the history of this school and an indelible part of the civil rights story of our university, our Commonwealth, and our nation. Before I present the awards to this year's winners, I want to share a very brief version of Gregory Swanson's story. Gregory Swanson was the first black student at the law school, the first black student at the University of Virginia, and the first student to study on an integrated basis at any formerly white university in the former Confederacy. And this year, 2025, marks the 75th anniversary of his admission and attendance at the law school. Mr. Swanson had received his undergraduate and law degrees at Howard University in 1944 and 48, respectively. He was a practicing lawyer. He was interested in procuring a job as a law professor at the Terrell Law School, a historically black law school in Washington, D.C. And with a view toward that, he applied to UVA for an LLM degree, an advanced law degree. The law school faculty voted to admit Mr. Swanson, but the university refused. Mr. Swanson sued in the United States District Court for the Western District of Virginia. He was represented by the firm of Hill, Martin, and Robinson and the Virginia chapter of the NAACP, and his legal team included civil rights giants such as Oliver Hill, Martin A. Martin, Spotswood Robinson, and Thurgood Marshall. Oral argument was held here in Charlottesville in a building that's now the Central Library on Market Street in downtown Charlottesville. It then housed the Federal District Courthouse. You can go there and see the very room in which this case was argued, which is in the upstairs of the library, as well as a historical marker about Mr. Swanson's victory. The court ruled in Swanson's favor, and 10 days later, he registered for classes in time to start the 1950 school year as the first black student of the University of Virginia. Mr. Swanson's own words describe how this triumph was also a burden. He was the only black student at a white university in a segregated white southern town. He wrote his sister about walking a mile to the law school from Vinegar Hill, a historically black Charlottesville neighborhood, and being stared at by white passersby who likely recognized him as the first black student at the university. He wrote to his sister, "I should like to read their minds. Sometimes I think that I do." He was somewhat socially isolated, but he also found support among some students and faculty as well as the local YMCA. Looking back years later, he said he knew there might be reactions, no matter how covert, to my admission, but I felt I was adequately prepared to meet them. And indeed, Mr. Swanson rose to every challenge. He took 8 courses over the academic year, though LLM students were not required to take any classes at all. He participated in university life, attending events, sporting events, concerts, and functions, and wrote to his sister that he was endeavoring to participate in university activities as much as possible, in part so that white students would get used to having black classmates. And he told his story and stood up for civil rights, both here and around the Commonwealth, as a frequent speaker and editorial writer. Ultimately, Mr. Swanson did not complete his LLM degree, but that was a product of a strange feature of the law school's academic program at the time. In the early 1950s, the UVA LLM degree required students to write a master's thesis that was typically completed after their year in residence at the law school. As you can imagine, many LLM students attended the law school for a year but did not complete the thesis requirement. Mr. Swanson successfully completed his year of residence and, like so many others, found his career taking him in other directions. He practiced law in Martinsville and Alexandria, fighting for civil rights causes both in and out of the courtroom. And in 1961, he joined the IRS under IRS Commissioner Mortimer Kaplan. And I note that name because Mr. Kaplan, in addition to being a famous tax lawyer, the co-founder of the firm Kaplan and Drysdale, a 1940 graduate of this law school, and the person for whom this room is named, also happened to be on the law faculty at the time that Gregory Swanson applied for admission to the law school and was a fierce advocate of Mr. Swanson's admission. He later got to invite Mr. Swanson to be a lawyer with him and colleague with him at the IRS, where Mr. Swanson practiced from the early 60s to his retirement in 1984. Mr. Swanson passed away at his home in Maryland in 1992. And since then, for all his many contributions, he has been honored here and elsewhere by both the Maryland and Virginia General Assemblies. His portrait hangs in Clay Hall right outside these doors. And in 2018, the law school established the Gregory Swanson Award to honor Gregory Swanson and also outstanding members of our community today who are following in his footsteps through their courage, perseverance, and commitment to justice. I'm delighted today to announce two winners of the 8th Annual Swanson Award, Laura Louise Rice and Shelby Singleton. I will say a few words about each before presenting her award. The first student we recognize today is Laura Louise Rice. As a classmate put it in her nomination letter, with her zest for justice, care for others, ethic of servant leadership, and abiding love for this school, LL embodies courage, perseverance, and commitment to justice and is deserving of this honor. Laura Louise is a 2022 graduate of the University of South Carolina's Honors College, where she studied medical humanities and public policy and was recognized with the school's Stephen N. Swanger Undergraduate Leadership Award. Throughout her time here in Charlottesville, Laura Louise likewise has been an incredible leader. She has served as the president of our first-year council, the president and historian of our Black Law Students Association chapter, the digital editor of the Virginia Journal of Law and Technology, a student worker in the Law School Admissions Office, a law school community fellow, a member of the Raven Society, and of course, our current Student Bar Association president. I'm tired just reading that list. I can only imagine what it's like to be LL. She spent her last 2 summers in the Dallas office of the international firm Weil Gotshal, and in August 2025, she will start a clerkship in the chambers of the Honorable DeAndrea G. Benjamin of the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit. In the many letters recommending Laura Louise for this award, students, faculty, and staff gave example after example of her servant leadership. One classmate put it this way: leading student organizations in law school is a commitment that can be thankless at times and incredibly time-consuming always. And LL's leadership of BALSA and now SBA demonstrates her commitment to her classmates and community. LL spends countless hours behind the scenes advocating for and caring for her classmates, making sure they are aware of the opportunities available to them and helping them achieve their goals. Another example of LL's incredible work as a student leader comes from one of her professors who says, through collaborative engagement with the law school administration and other student groups, she has contributed to a law school that feels so much more inclusive of Black students than any other law school in which I have attended or taught. BALSA, under her leadership, established and maintained academic support programs for law students, training them on how to brief a case and how to take a law school exam. And under her leadership, BALSA's advocacy competition groups thrived, winning or placing highly in moot court and mock trial competitions. The most important of Laura Louise's accomplishments, however, is much less tangible. Laura Louise created a sense of belonging for Black law students, which is a central reason why they thrive here in a way that is unique amongst law schools. Black law students are present. BALSA is central to the law school identity, and Black law students are thriving due in major part to Laura Louise's leadership as BALSA president. The letters supporting LL's nomination for the Swanson Award echoed these same themes, that she builds community from the ground up, that she is as brilliant as she is compassionate and kind, that she sees her classmates for who they are, that she works hard every day to make sure our community is meeting the needs of all of its members, and that her enormous efforts have made her an essential part of our law school community. For all of her many contributions, I am delighted and honored to present the first of this year's Swanson Awards to Laura Louise Rice.
Thank you, Dean Kendrick, for that warm introduction. I first want to take the time to thank both my Lord and Savior, for without him, I'm nothing and would not be here in front of you today. Thank you to my family who drove here all the way from South Carolina and Georgia to be here today, and especially to my grandfather, who's the reason I went to law school in the first place. I'm getting emotional, I'm sorry. Thank you to everyone that nominated me and selected me for this event and for this award. And thank you to each and every one of you for being here today to celebrate the powerful and remarkable legacies of both Gregory Swanson and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The Gregory Swanson Award is not just an award for student leaders. It's not just to acknowledge students who merely care about racial justice, but it's to recognize those who reflect the character and conduct that Gregory Swanson exemplified. Those that seek to occupy spaces that may feel unwelcome at first, but then demand justice and equity in those spaces. He was a trailblazer so that we could be pathfinders. He saw injustice in the world, and he used his voice to speak up and correct it. And to be recognized in honor of Gregory Swanson's legacy is truly invaluable, as you can see. So, I spent this past weekend both preparing my remarks for today, but also doing something that all of us law students will have to do, and registering for the bar exam. And for those of you that don't know, and especially all of my fellow law students who will be doing the same very soon, part of that application process is going back and looking at your UVA law application. And as I was looking through, I was trying to match up my employment history on the application to my employment history I submitted. It's a very tedious process. And I just thought I'd read through my old law school application. And as I did, I became very overcome with emotion. Not only because I was admitted to law school right about 3 years ago, which is kind of crazy, but it was a true full circle moment. In my personal statement, I wrote about my experiences being a Black woman and what that meant for me experiencing the health system in America, as well as my passion for health justice. And in my diversity statement, I talked about my grandparents and the deep impact that their commitments to public service have had on me, as well as their impacts in their communities and how they've impacted who I am today. And the closing statements of each of those personal statements really just spoke to me, and I wanted to share them quickly today. So to close my personal statement, I wrote, I am committed to reshaping the reality that my community must forever speak, act, and advocate for ourselves 10 times louder than others merely due to the color of our skin. And standing here today, being acknowledged as a student committed to the very values that Gregory Swanson personified, I find myself overwhelmed by what those values really mean. And that statement I just read was exactly what Gregory Swanson was committed to. He was committed to reshaping the reality of law school education, committed to receiving an education in a community that did not want to receive him. He spoke up, he took action, and he advocated as loudly as he could so Black students could have a place in this law school. And I'd go as far to say that Gregory Swanson revolutionized the realities for both Black and students of color at the law school, across UVA broadly. He gave them a voice, and he gave me a voice to be here before you today. Secondly, in my diversity statement, I wrote in closing, my name is not merely a way to recognize me, but rather it recognizes the legacy I continue to embody. For those that don't know, yes, my name is Laura Louise, but that's because my maternal grandmother is named Laura and my paternal grandmother is named Louise. And as I stand here today, I'm an embodiment of the legacies and dreams of my grandparents. I stand here because they stood where they stood. I stand here because Gregory Swanson had the courage to stand here. Because John F. Merchant, who was the first black student to graduate from the law school, had the perseverance to stand here. Because Elaine Jones remained committed to justice as the first black woman to attend UVA, and she made the choice to stand here. We all stand here because so many individuals were committed to reshaping the realities of UVA, reshaping the realities of what a legal education means, and reshaping the very realities of our society to bring us closer to the dreams of Dr. King, to his dream that children would one day live in a nation where they will no longer be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And as each and every one of us stands here today, and in our respective corners of the world, it's our responsibility to continue that legacy, to embody the courage, the perseverance, the commitment to justice that Gregory Swanson did, to leave this place even better than we found it, and help make Dr. King's dream come true. Thank you.
Thank you so much, LL, for those beautiful words. And I can't possibly follow them except for the fact that what I get to do is to present the other Swanson Award. Those are the only words that could possibly follow. The second student we honor today is Shelby Singleton. In one letter nominating Shelby for this award, one of her professors wrote, "Shelby is a wonderful student and an even more impressive human being. She demonstrates the kind of outstanding character and conduct that define Mr. Swanson, and she shares his deep commitment to justice and unwavering willingness to do the hard work to achieve it. Shelby is guided personally and professionally by her sense of right and wrong, by her faith and belief in humanity. She follows the golden rule. Shelby is a kind and generous human being, someone others want to be around. I appreciate her humility, eagerness for self-improvement, and continued personal growth, and her passion for social and racial justice." Shelby is a 2022 graduate of George Washington University, where she earned her BA magna cum laude in political communication. During her time at GW, Shelby interned for 2 different U.S. senators and also served as the Vice President of Diversity Inclusion for GW Student Association. Here at the law school, Shelby is a senior editorial board member of the Virginia Journal of Social Policy and the Law, a member of the law school's Public Service Committee, Law Christian Fellowship's Vice President of Inclusion, a fellow of the Program in Law and Public Service, a community fellow, and a member of BALSA. And again, I am tired reading the list. Incredible work. During her 2.5 years at the law school, Shelby has served as a legal intern at the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division and at the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund. She has worked on a pro bono basis with our Virginia Innocence Project. She's been a member of both our state and local government policy clinic and our International Human Rights Clinic. Another professor writes that Shelby brings a wholehearted, selfless dedication to advancing civil rights that is rare among students today, along with an increasingly sophisticated knowledge of how to advance those rights. I'm impressed with her longtime commitment to voting rights and the work she hopes to pursue as a public interest attorney. And this professor describes Shelby as one of the most promising public interest students from the class of 2025. One of Shelby's classmates joined in Shelby's nomination, describing her work with the Law Christian Fellowship. The student writes that Shelby continually exudes unwavering courage and a rock-solid commitment to justice. In executive board meetings, she has made numerous solutions-oriented suggestions on ways to make LCF more inclusive, and I have no doubt these changes are only the beginning that will be felt for future generations of LCF students. Through her work with LCF, the nominator notes, Shelby has embodied the pinnacle of our faith, to love your neighbor as yourself. In all of the letters supporting Shelby's nomination, her classmates and colleagues call attention to her devotion to public service, her generosity of spirit, her desire to help others on scales both large and small, by protecting American civil rights and by supporting friends through personal crises, and her deep grounding in her faith, which propels her forward in her life of service. Perhaps one professor put it back when they wrote that Shelby is driven by an earnest desire to do good and be good. I'm thrilled to support someone like that because I know her success in a way will contribute to our collective success. In sum, Shelby is the kind of person we will be so proud to say someday is a graduate of this institution, a person of the highest character whose commitment to justice runs deep. For all of these reasons, I am delighted and honored to present the 2025 Gregory Swanson Award to Shelby Singleton.
Thank you so much, Dean Kendrick. First, I would like to thank God for this award, because without him, this would not be possible. I would also like to thank the selection committee for awarding me as one of the Swanson Award winners this year. Thank you to my family and friends who came to support me, and a special thank you to Professor Chin Lei, Nathaniel Glass, and Colby Woodis for their mentorship and friendship, as well as nominating me for this award. I'm beyond blessed to have people I can learn from and who see the best in me, so thank you. Mr. Gregory Swanson displayed immense courage, perseverance, and integrity throughout his life by overcoming giant barriers. It is truly an honor and a humbling experience to be recognized for displaying those same qualities. However, I must be honest. Being recognized for character and perseverance feels a little awkward because I'm not deserving of this praise. I get my perseverance and strength from Jesus. I make such a bold statement because if you knew my story and how I even decided to apply to law school in the first place, you would know that I am just an example of the grace and love of God. Throughout law school, I really struggled, from questioning how I got into UVA my first semester to considering dropping out my second semester when grades came out, to facing mental and physical health challenges throughout my time here. My road to a JD was rocky and fraught. But in the midst of those struggles, though, I was blessed with an amazing law and public service cohort filled with people like Nathaniel, Delaney, and Leah, who I could talk to about real-life issues and who shared my love for justice. I was blessed with great friends who lifted me up in prayer whenever I had challenges, like Colby, Kristen, and Eugen. Whenever I needed a laugh, I had my Bolsa community to turn to, like Alyssa Lawrence, Jarrett, Daniel, and Alyssa Marshall. And lastly, I had an amazing professor like Professor Chin Lei, who took a genuine interest in how I showed up inside and outside the classroom. Throughout this time of law school, I learned to give Jesus the glory after reading a Bible verse that became an anchor to me throughout this hard time. Jesus said in John 16, "In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, for I, Jesus, have overcome the world." I learned that true joy is not based on the absence of struggles or pain in my life. It is a guarantee that everyone will suffer in some way, and just because I attend the number 4 law school in the nation doesn't mean that I'm immune from that reality. But true joy and peace, I've learned, is based on the presence of my Lord, who is well acquainted with suffering and who walks through even the darkest valleys with me, and that's Jesus. As I sit and listen to these wonderful things that my peers and professors wrote while honoring me with the Swanson Award, I am sincerely humbled. But I know that the love, kindness, and light I try to exude to others is only because I was first captured by that same love years before. Thank you.
After all of that, I feel like we have to have one more round of applause for both winners. All right, I'm now honored to introduce Chief Justice Bernard Goodwin of the Supreme Court of Virginia. And I also want to give a warm welcome to his lovely wife, Sharon. Chief Justice Goodwin is a proud graduate of UVA Law School. He served as the notes editor for the Virginia Tax Review. While here, he won the Ritter Award for honor, character, and integrity, and was inducted into the Raven Society. Governor Tim Kaine appointed Goodwin to the Supreme Court in 2007. He was elected to a 12-year term the next year by the General Assembly, which re-elected him in 2020. His colleagues on the Supreme Court of Virginia elected him to serve as the second Black Chief Justice in Virginia's history in 2022. Previously, Goodwin served in Chesapeake as a circuit judge for 10 years, and before that, as a general district court judge. Prior to joining the bench, he taught federal civil procedure, Virginia civil procedure, and civil litigation practice as a research associate professor right here at the law school. He also previously served as a litigation partner at Wilcox & Savage, a Norfolk law firm. Chief Justice Goodwin graduated from Harvard University with a bachelor's degree in economics. The Virginia Bar Association tomorrow will award him their highest honor, the Gerald L. Belials Distinguished Service Award at the 135th Annual Meeting in Williamsburg. The president of the Virginia Bar Association wrote, "Chief Justice Goodwin exemplifies the values that this award is designed to honor. He's a humble but giant force for good in Virginia, and he has been a strong leader in the push for pro bono service and equal access to justice for decades." With the Virginia Bar Association, Chief Justice Goodwin presided over the 2024 Pro Bono Summit and co-chaired the Virginia Access to Justice Commission. He will deliver remarks, and then we will allow for Q&A. Please join me in welcoming Chief Justice Bernard Goodwin.
Thank you, Professor Robinson, for those kind words. Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to stand before you today as part of this Martin Luther King celebration. I am a proud graduate of the University of Virginia Law School, and I'm deeply honored to share this occasion with each of you. I'd like to take this opportunity, too, to give a shout out to my small section professor, Alex Johnson, who has been my friend and mentor since I graduated from law school, and I certainly appreciated all of his support and encouragement, and without it, I don't think I'd be standing here today. I want to reflect on the enduring significance of Dr. King and the Civil Rights Movement to the vitality of the rule of law in our country, and to me personally as someone who grew up in the rural South in the 1960s in the Civil Rights era. The America that we know today, while not perfect, stands worlds apart from where we were in the 1960s, when racial segregation was purposely woven into the laws of our country. The progress our country has made in such a relatively short period of time is absolutely remarkable to me. So much so that it can be difficult for many to comprehend how recently it was, or just accepted, and not only accepted, but insisted upon in the southern United States, that all things be segregated in our society. Consider this. It was 1971 before the Virginia Constitution, which mandated racial segregation in schools, was replaced. Those who live in the South through the Civil War era experienced the reality of segregation on a daily basis. It's important to remember that recently enough, for many people we know in our communities to recall it vividly, there existed in our country a system which mandated separate and unequal treatment of people because of their race in all aspects of their lives. Not only was racism expressed openly and clearly by government officials, it was implemented by the law. It was illegal for a black person to go through a door to drink from a water fountain that was marked for a white person. You could go to jail for not giving a white person your seat on a bus if they asked to take it from you. The public schools were mandated to be racially segregated, and even though separate but equal was supposed to be the law of the land, it was completely ignored. While we now teach about segregation as history, we have to remember it's history, but it's not ancient history. It's recent history. I remember the Civil Rights era, and I suspect there are other people in this room who remember it as well. I grew up in the segregated South in the 60s. I remember driving by Ku Klux Klan meetings. People were on the street in their robes with their weapons walking up and down the street. I witnessed firsthand overtly people being discriminated against as far as education is concerned, as well as using public facilities and other opportunities. And I'll tell you what, guys, I've heard in talking to some of my friends, they talked about microaggressions. These aggressions were not micro. They were straight up declarations that black people were inferior and supposed to be subservient, and the law required that they be so. Thus, to me, Martin Luther King remains one of the most transformative figures in American history. His voice, resolute and unwavering in its moral certainty, his precise words, and his moral certainty pierced through the conscience of our divided nation, calling on America to live up to its foundational promises of liberty and justice for all. He demanded this not through violence and anger, but through the moral authority of nonviolent protest, of discriminatory laws, the precision of the written and spoken word, and the power of collective action. The nonviolent protests he led were often met, unfortunately, with violent resistance, physical abuse, and arrest. The civil rights movement was not just social. It was a profoundly legal movement. Consider the landmark case of Brown versus Board of Education, which struck down the doctrine of separate but equal, paving the way for desegregation of the schools. Or the Civil Rights Act of 1964, or the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which dismantled decades of legal discrimination in employment, voting, and other areas of everyday life. Federal courts were instrumental in enforcing civil rights laws, often stepping in where state and local governments resisted. The victories of the civil rights lawyers like Thurgood Marshall and Oliver Hill underscored how the rule of law could be harnessed as an instrument of justice. By adhering to and strengthening the rule of law, the lawyers in the civil rights movement demonstrated how legal institutions could be used to correct the injustices and uphold the Constitution's guarantees of life, liberty, and justice. Dr. King's insistence on adhering to nonviolence and his belief in the principles of justice, even in the face of hatred and violence, showed us the power of courage and conviction. The actions of the lawyers involved in the civil rights movement showed that the law, which was often used as a tool of oppression, could be used as a tool of liberation. Dr. King's genius lay in his ability to appeal to the law's higher ideals while challenging its failures. He once said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." This is a call to each of us, a reminder that the work of upholding justice is never done. To fully understand the magnitude of the contribution Dr. King and others involved in the civil rights movement made, we must confront and appreciate the deeply ingrained racism that was an inherent part of the South's culture and laws. The story of racial equality in Virginia is one of initial progress followed by violent backlash. The Virginia experience is somewhat similar to that of other southern states, no doubt, and I will recount some of Virginia's history to provide some idea of the enormity of the endeavor that Reverend King and the others in the civil rights movement undertook as they pressed forward with the drive to desegregate the South. After the end of the Civil War in 1863, during Reconstruction, Virginia adopted a new constitution that was progressive for its time. It called for black men to have the right to vote, because no women did at that time, and established Virginia's first public school system. This period of Reconstruction led to early and significant progress in racial equality in Virginia. Interestingly, in the 1870s and 1880s, African Americans were elected to Congress from Virginia. They were elected in large numbers to the Virginia State Legislature and to local offices, and their voices and votes influenced state and federal elections. The General Assembly was even eventually controlled by a biracial party which called itself the Readjuster Party. However, this progress was fragile. The former slave owners and other white Virginians were aggrieved, they were insulted, they were angry, and to say it bluntly, they just weren't going to stand for it. They were angered by the fact that blacks were being treated as their equal. They were angered by the fact that black men were being given the right to vote, as well as the fact that their former slaves were being educated. And they were not going to stand for that without a fight. So the progress towards racial equality was met with violent and fierce resistance. The violent backlash culminated in events like the Danville Massacre of 1883, where a white supremacist mob attacked black citizens and political leaders, killing and injuring many 3 days before the 1883 election for the General Assembly, which was then controlled by the biracial Readjuster Party. And I would note, at the time, Danville was a majority black city which had elected black people to its city council, which was one of the reasons that these people were riled up. And the mindset of the majority of the white citizens, or at least the ones, yes, I will just go with that. The majority of the white citizens, as history would appear to make it, was expressed in a statement which appeared in the Richmond Dispatch newspaper the day after the massacre, written by its editor. And I quote, "These Negroes had evidently come to regard themselves as some sort the rightful rulers of the town," the paper's editor wrote. "They have been taught a lesson, a dear one it is true, but nevertheless a lesson which will not be lost upon them, nor upon their race elsewhere in Virginia." The massacre was part of a broader campaign to terrorize black communities and suppress their political power. The Readjuster Party lost its majority in the 1883 election and never regained it. White supremacists regained control of the state government and swiftly enacted Jim Crow laws that segregated and discriminated against people by race in all aspects of Virginia society. The crowning blow to the gains that blacks had achieved during Reconstruction was delivered with Virginia's 1902 Constitution, designed explicitly to disenfranchise black citizens. The drafters of this Constitution made no attempt to hide their intentions. Carter Glass, who was a congressman and senator from Virginia, and I think he was Secretary of Treasury in Woodrow Wilson's cabinet, like I said, he was one of the drafters of this, and he stated exactly what they were trying to do. He declared the purpose of the new Constitution was to, quote, "eliminate the darky as a political factor in this state," end quote. And he was very smart and effective in what he was doing. Through poll taxes, literacy tests, and other discriminatory measures, the 1902 Constitution virtually erased black political power and participation in Virginia for decades. After this Constitution was passed, it was close to 70 years before another black person was elected to the Virginia House of Delegates. The effects of this disenfranchisement were devastating. Without political power, black communities were left vulnerable to segregation, to economic exploitation, and to systematic inequality, and they faced all of those things. The public school system, initially established as a beacon of hope, became a tool for perpetrating segregation and inequality. The attitude of the voting majority in the southern states is exemplified by the rhetoric of its leaders and by the racially discriminatory Jim Crow laws that they passed. Mississippi Governor James K. Vardaman, a few years after the passage of Virginia's 1902 Constitution, said, and I quote, "The Negro should never have been entrusted with the ballot. He is unqualified to exercise the most responsible duty of citizenship. He is physically, mentally, morally, racially, and internally the white man's inferior. There is nothing in the history of his race, nothing in his individual character, nothing in his achievement of the past, nor his promise of the future, which entitles him to stand side by side with the white man." That quote sums up the prevailing attitude toward blacks and racial equality in the South at that time. And that attitude had not changed by the time I was born in rural Virginia in 1961. It also sums up the heartfelt rationale of the white Southerners for the legally sanctioned and approved racism that Reverend King and the other leaders of the civil rights movement were trying their best to dismantle. Hindsight is not only 20/20, but it also is a way of making the present seem as though it were inevitable. But it wasn't. As Dr. King has said, human progress never rolls on wheels of inevitability. The freedom people of color enjoy today in our country was not inevitable. There was a pitched battle waged by the white separatists against the civil rights movement. There was also a battle for the hearts and minds of Americans and their perceptions of what was fair treatment of racial minorities in our country, and the sovereign right of the southern states to treat minorities as they saw fit, given their cultural norms. When the battle started, the outcome was not assured, nor was it guaranteed. The only certainty for a person voicing support for racial equality was physical and mental danger from the segregationists. Those who supported government-sanctioned racism did not take kindly to attempts to change the world as they knew it and the way they believed the world ought to be. They freely used violence and intimidation to prevent changes to the status quo. And local law enforcement usually turned a blind eye when protesters' homes and churches were bombed and their lives were threatened or even taken. As one of the most visible leaders of the civil rights movement, Dr. King faced constant threats to his physical safety. He was arrested approximately 30 times. His home was bombed. Someone fired a shotgun through his front door. He was stabbed and nearly died. But up until the date of his assassination, Dr. King persevered because he felt it was his religious duty to do everything he possibly could to advance justice in America. He saw it as a moral imperative. He wanted the obligation created by the founding ideals stated in our Declaration of Independence when it said that all men are created equal to be fulfilled. The racial equality that presently exists in our country today only exists because of the tremendous sacrifices made by people like Dr. King. Dr. King is a hero because he is one of those people who did the actual heavy lifting needed to move American society from where it was when Governor Vardaman made his statement to where we are today. Dr. King didn't do it alone. There were many, many, many others who were inspired by him, who believed in him, and who acted along with him, suffering brutal beatings, attacks by vicious dogs, jail, and even worse, all at the hands of their own government. All because they had the temerity to insist that they be treated fairly. It would take decades of struggle to even begin to dismantle this system of legal segregation and to restore the rights of black people that they had at Reconstruction immediately after slavery. I think this history serves as a sobering reminder of the constant vigilance needed required to protect civil rights. And it gives notice regarding the difficulty of reestablishing rights once they're lost. Dr. King's legacy is not just a historical academic matter for me, because I grew up in Southampton County, Virginia. It's a place known for its quiet rural beauty, but it's also known for its turbulent racial past. It's the place where Nat Turner's slave rebellion took place in 1831. And it's the place where, even a century later, the fight for civil rights for blacks was practically non-existent, at least until the Brown versus Board of Education decision happened, and there were attempts to integrate the county school system. When I started public school in 1967, our schools in Southampton County were still segregated for the most part. The Supreme Court's decision in Brown versus Board, of course, had happened in 1954, but like many places in the South, Virginia was resistant to integration. And in Virginia in particular, that resistance was fierce and prolonged. The government of our state engaged in what they called massive resistance. They refused to follow the orders of the federal court. They threatened to shut down the schools. They claimed that they had a legal right to interdisposition, that they didn't have to, their citizens didn't have to follow the federal law because the state law was different. They did everything they could to make sure that those schools did not integrate, and it was only after their last gasp, having lost not only in federal court, but in the Supreme Court of Virginia, which was made up of, honestly, their peers, they finally had to admit that they had to abandon massive resistance and abide by the Brown versus Board of Education decision. So it wasn't until 1970, nearly 105 years after the abolition of slavery, that the schools in the county I lived in were fully integrated. And by then I was 9 years old. I remember hearing Dr. King's speeches and sermons on television and on the radio, or my older sister reading them to me. And I believed, and he was important to me and to many others, because it helped us to believe that change was not only possible, but that it was inevitable, so long as we had the physical and mental courage to pursue that change. His dream of a world where children would be evaluated not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, resonated in me as a little boy. And that's the reason why I was set on the path that I followed, to becoming a lawyer. We've come a long way since Dr. King's death. Yet, we have to acknowledge that our journey is not complete. Today, we still face challenges such as disparities in our criminal justice system, persistent educational inequalities, algorithmic bias in our technology. The work of racial equality and justice is not a destination, it's a continuous journey, and we're on it. It requires vigilance, and it requires the efforts of each and every one of us to continue to strive to achieve societal unity and racial equality and justice. Dr. King once said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." What he didn't say, but what he surely knew, is that the arc doesn't bend on its own. It takes the hands and hearts of people to move it. And as lawyers and as law students, you have chosen a path that places you at the intersection of law and justice. You have or will have the tools, the knowledge, and I hope the passion to bend that arc toward justice whenever you have the opportunity to do so. As we honor the legacy of Dr. King, let us recommit ourselves to his noble cause. Let us work tirelessly to build and maintain a nation where the color of one's skin does not determine their opportunities, their worth, or their place in our society. In doing so, not only do we honor the past, but we also secure a brighter future for all Americans. Thank you all.